We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. Hey BraveCo men, this week's episode is from a teaching that I did with Danny Silk on his KYLO University. So I really hope that you enjoy it, and I will see you next week.
All right. We're going to go into Q&A. And Jay, hey, I'm going to let you facilitate it. You're the man. You know what you're doing.
Kelly, you were the first one with your hand up, girl. That was fast.
Hello. Thank you. My mind is, yes, this is a lot of new information for me. The thing that struck me that I'd like you to explain a little deeper is when you said pain is unmet needs. That statement went like this, but I'm not sure I understand it.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think through it, like when your needs go unmet, it leads to pain. So we can start there, right? We know that that's a sound principle. And think about marriage. Are you married?
Yes.
Okay. So inside of a marriage, it's like that's definitely probably the biggest causers of divorce is I've got all these unmet needs, whether you're telling me them and I'm not meeting them, or I don't know how to communicate my needs to you. And therefore I'm just in a marriage that's very one-sided. And it's like, well, that every time, 100% of the time is going to lead to tons of pain in your life. It's the same thing. If I keep going back to this one just because I think all of us could put ourselves in the shoes and go like, wow, if you were a child and you grew up in a home where you were abused physically and emotionally, it's not just the abuse, but it's what also didn't happen to you that is so painful, right? It's like, you called me stupid, you put me down, you physically hit me, but you also didn't care for me. You also didn't want me. You also didn't spend time for me. What's wrong with me? And I'm not saying every single bit of pain ever is an unmet need. I mean, sometimes pain is literally, I hurt myself, or you called me a bad name, and like, that's really painful. But oftentimes, especially when we're talking about how to heal pain, now you have all these unmet needs, right? Because if your dad called you stupid and was like, that's my dad's story. My dad was called stupid ass by his dad. That was his name. His dad called him, his stepfather called him stupid ass all the time and physically beat him. Okay. So what's the pain? Well, there's lots of pain. One was the physical and emotional. The fact that his dad was calling him names and beating him was obviously a ton of pain. But then on the flip side of that is I didn't have a dad to love me, to nurture me, because the physical pain's gone, right? So his dad beating him, that's gone. That's already been healed physically. Now, emotionally, what's the pain that he's bringing to God? Not the fact that his dad called him a name. My dad called me a name. I feel so hurt that my dad called me a name. It's actually the fact that dad didn't want me, that he wasn't there for me, that now I don't have a dad. Like, that's the need. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so it's not just, and a lot of people get stuck on the fact that somebody did something to them. It's like, well, there's a measure of healing that needs to happen there, but the bigger pain is the need that's now come out of that. What is underneath that? What did that uproot? Is I'm not safe. I'm not being taken care of. Who's going to love me? I'm a piece of trash. Is the identity behind having a dad that doesn't want you? It doesn't, only sees, whatever. Does that help you to understand? Yeah. Christine's iPad.
Hi everyone, I've got to whisper because the baby's asleep next door. She's been really unsettled. So I'm going to try my best. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Brilliant. Oh, great. So I hope I get this question right, because it's just, I mean, I'm having one of those, I'm all over now. I mean, I'm literally, I can't even read my writing. I mean, I need somebody to interpret it, to be honest. Brilliant. Really, I knew this section of this course would do something, and it's like, oh my gosh. What I think I want to ask is, we talked about when we normally we go to God with this, because I've got stuff and I know that stuff's come up. Do you think, Jason, that it's maybe a good idea to also involve someone else to help you to go through the process or the questions? Because it's not that I get fully stuck, but recently, I'll be really quick, just recently, the reason I'm here is because something keeps coming, bite me on my backside. I've been going around in circles. And when we were talking recently, I found that I have got more unforgiveness than I care to think. I thought I'd dealt with it. That old adage, I've dealt with that. So that's just by what you've shared and what somebody else has just shared there. I've got quite a bit. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, on seeking some help. I mean, I've had therapy and stuff, but I think helping processing this stuff. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah. So I always say, like, any place that you get stuck, that's where you need the help, So I would say start processing through. And if you get stuck in a spot where you're unable to, hear God for an answer or find a place of compassion, that's where I'd get help. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, there's been times in my life where I didn't need, like, I processed through my divorce almost all the way through and didn't really need a ton of help for that actual process. I got into a groove and I got really, I eventually loved the process. It sounds weird, but I just kind of got into a place where I was like, I'm not afraid of the next hard memory. It's just like, I'm going to dive into it. And I had to learn how to not dive into pain after. Became sort of an addiction almost. Because I would find I really enjoyed being with myself and with God in that moment. And so my wife, once I got remarried, she'd be like, you can't spend 3 days talking to God about, like, me cutting you off while we were talking. Like, you just need to talk through how it was painful, and I'll apologize and we can move on. So, but yeah, if you're getting stuck in a spot, that's where counseling can be really helpful, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Kelly, go for it.
Yeah, hi. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about, you had said, what was it? The pain. I'm not afraid of the pain anymore. And so I've done a lot of work I was sexually abused and alcoholic family and yada, yada, yada. And God has, like, taken me through so many layers of it. Like you said, the onion, right? But it's like the current, like it's not the past stuff as much anymore. It's like when it's repeated, right? So, like, obviously they're not sexually abusing me anymore or anything like that, but my mom is not present. Like, she is still in that denial and just, and so walking it out in the current.
Yeah.
Making sense. Like, yeah, it's not like you don't forget the past, right? It's like you heal in it and it's like, okay, I forget. But then when it keeps getting, I feel like it's a scab that keeps getting reopened, and I want the scab to, like, fully, like, just but anyhow.
Yeah. So again, it's back to an unmet need. I'm trying to get my mom to meet a need that she refuses to meet.
She's just not capable of it.
She's not capable of it. And if you stop there, right? Like, a lot of people stop there and they go on with their life, and it's like, well, that's a lot of pain. You have to process that pain. So that's a journal entry. I keep talking to you and you keep plugging your ears, telling me that you don't want to listen. Sorry, were you telling me to be quiet?
Sorry, no, I have 3 little ones, 2 5-year-olds and a 3-year-old.
Oh, you're great. No, you're fine. So
No,
so in essence, you're reliving that, right? As it you're s- it's triggering because that's what happened to you in your past is I'm experiencing something that I can't talk to my environment about. They don't want to hear it. Everyone's going living life as if it's fine and I'm not experiencing this thing that I'm really experiencing. And so I'm back to needing to process about how painful that is, about how neglected I feel. And I'm going to need to get down to the bottom of what is it that I really need from God.
okay. So I've done that, but maybe it's just like, so for you, like if it's a repeated, it doesn't hurt anymore. Like the pain isn't, it's,
No, I would set boundaries with her.
yeah. Okay.
So that's the next step is like I don't have somebody in my life in a place where they're continually not meeting my need. So I change expectations. And I'm not saying never see your mom again. I'm saying don't put her in the spot where you need her and she can't give you what you need. Like you might have to find a different mom figure in your life to meet that need that can be there for you, like you obviously are for your kids, you know? So once you grow up, like parents aren't something that you are obligated. I mean, it's like honor your mother and father. Yes. Also, don't go sleep with wolves and allow them to just tear you up, right? So you're like balancing those two things. You got to put your mom in a different place in your life and
Well,
maybe
and
read this book.
I have with myself, with my kids, it's a little because she's in there, that's the part where it kind of struggles. But I think it's just more that I need to go a little deeper and see what that is and just take more time with it. So thanks. Thanks for letting me process.
Yeah, I think the sadness is that your mom was never there to actually protect you and take care of you the way that you were protecting and taking care of your kids, right? So that's the hardest, saddest thing that you're probably going to have to cry through, and so maybe it's a tiny bit deeper, and yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's God has used it in so many ways, but there's still that stuff sometimes. So, all right,
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. All right, Summer.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much. And I do want to say I'm so sorry for everything you went through, but your testimony is amazing and you're just helping so many people process so much pain for themselves. I do want to ask, is this the same type of thing that we could work through with our children? Like I do see one of my daughters does try to mask pain and anger and control and emotional type stuff. Is this something that it is safe to take her through, or what is your
How old
opinion
is she?
on that? She's 9.
So I would go more towards like teaching her the core emotion wheel and how to talk through her emotions, right? And so, like, the connection codes is a great resource for this. The connection codes, like you can go to connectioncodes.com and download their core emotion wheel, which is really cool. And getting your kids used to talking about their emotions is obviously really helpful because your daughter can start in saying, I felt so sad today about whatever Joey who hit me. And just don't shut them down. Just dive into it with them. Like, oh, tell me about that. So a great phrase for, of a parent is tell me about that. And so you can dive deeper into it. I just felt so angry, he wasn't loving me or wasn't taking care of me. And, in a lot of ways, you play that role of God for your kids that God plays for you at this point. And I'm not saying that you are God. So if people are listening to this, you're like, that's not theologically correct, but it is sound. So, your kids are going to relate to the Holy Spirit, how they relate to you, and they're going to relate to Father God, how they relate to your husband. And so you can do a lot of the work with your kids if you'll listen to them and, allow them to process their emotions and where they're at. Because now I know what they need. Like, oh, they got tore down at school. They're wondering if they're lovable. I'm going to go give them that piece. Oh, buddy, I know that it feels so painful to have someone reject you. But let me tell you that let me tell you what I think about you. And as they get older, let's talk about why somebody would tell that to you. And they can start to comprehend, like, hurting people hurt people. It's not actually about you, it's about them. And that's where it becomes a superpower, right? Is when they start to realize, like, oh, I'm getting bullied because this person's hurting, not because something's wrong with me. That's when your kids start to really, grow and get strong. When we got bullied and no one talked to us about being bullied, we just grew up thinking it was about us, and we're still struggling thinking that it's about us because no one handed us that gift when we were young. So I would say, instead of having them sit down and journal out all of their pain, I would have them talk it through using the core emotion wheel, teaching them their emotions. So my daughter, who's 3, could tell me the difference between sad and angry and frustrated. And we just started when we were really young with, oh, babe, it sounds like you're really frustrated, or, oh, you look so sad right now, or, wow, you're really happy, or, looks like you feel a lot of shame right now. Tell me about that shame, and they get used to learning how to talk through their emotions.
Okay, but is this the same thing? Like, if we know that there was a trauma that had happened a few years ago, same type of thing?
So that's where with kids, I would go to a therapist.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where, like, a child play therapist or an occupational therapist, to actually help them process through. Because, like, my daughter, Riley, when she was 9, we took her to a child play therapist to help her work through the divorce stuff because she was acting out. And it was a God's lifesaver, because how they want to process is so different than us,
Okay.
And so, she processed while playing in the sand, and processed while organizing stuff. And the therapist was helpful to take her at her own pace and help her put things in order and process them. And yeah, so I would say, like, I'm not sitting my own kids down and taking them through their past trauma by having them go through this process.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions, by the way. iPhone 63.
No le pregunté si era de ayer, pero me aplanó 2 ahorita.
I don't know this lady's name, but you're next. You are iPhone. Your screen says iPhone 63.
That's Beth, I think.
I'm iPhone 63. I had no idea. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. Well, okay. My question is, everything you said was so good, but and I totally agree. But when you're in a marriage and the offenses keep happening, and I was married to a man who grew up in an alcoholic home, and there was a lot of stuff going on there, and I would forgive, but then, like this afternoon, it's the same thing, or tomorrow morning, or the next day, and so life is so busy, and you're going and going, like you have children, a lot going on, and I didn't know how to do that. I thought I forgave, but then something else would happen, and and it was coming at such a pace because there was a lot of brokenness in his life too that he was unwilling to face, and so I don't know. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're living in abuse. You're living in active abuse. So, when you're living in abuse, it's not that you haven't forgiven, it's that you're continually being abused. And therefore, that you don't trust, and you shouldn't trust. I mean, why would you trust somebody that isn't managing themselves or you well? And so, yeah, I mean, lots of suggestions, like set healthy boundaries, read the boundaries book, and get really good at setting limits. And when they break the limits, there's consequences for that. Like, wow, I don't feel safe around you. And I mean, eventually the decision to get a separation would be their decision, not your decision. They're
Yeah.
unable to manage themselves. So the you know, forgiveness has nothing to do with, well, I'm in a continual place of abuse. I guess on some level, I wouldn't even say that you're not even staying current with the level of abuse. I would say that you can't have a healthy marriage that's abusive. It just doesn't happen. It's like, well, you can't have fresh water if there's salt water in it. It's no longer fresh. It's just salt water.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely, if this was 10 years ago or whenever you're in your marriage, I'd say, yeah, you need to set some really healthy, hard limits. You got to get really good at boundaries, not ones that keep people out, but ones that are designed to keep people in. They also keep people out, but it's designed to keep people in. And learning how to communicate your boundaries to your husband and communicate your needs in a way that is loving and powerful. He may not respond loving and powerful to that, but that would be his choice, not yours. That would have been the way to move forward in your relationship.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Dee Dee, you're up, girl.
Hey, Jay. So we're very big fans of TC Bethel Transformation Center over here. And we're very grateful for your ministry and everything you guys do here at Casa Matthews. My husband and I, we love you guys very much. I have a two-part question, and you kind of unpacked it with Kelly because it's kind of similar. But it's in the context of spiritual abuse. And while we had the 5-minute break, I was going over the steps and went over step 3, which was what was it again? To find the theme. And just to give you a little bit of context, we left our church for 20 years past December, and they just had their biggest conference of the year. And a video was shared with me where he used his pulpit to speak about after this is over a year old, that one of his prophets had a vision that everybody who left his church and mantle would get sick, get a reprobate mind, and eventually physically die. So this happened like 2 weeks ago. And so I'm unpacking this right now because I felt that I had forgiven, and I very much try to practice looking at things through the lens of God's eye, the war within. We understand forgiveness. We understand unforgiveness is this thing, but I'm having a hard time showing compassion because in February, I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. God healed me. I am in recovery right now of my last surgery. But I guess my question is, if you're having a hard time showing compassion, it's almost like I feel like I know what I'm supposed to do because I am someone that loves hard, loves God, loves people. And I'm trying to really just show and extend compassion to this man and his ministry and his leadership. But I'm having a hard time there. So what would be something that you think would help? And again, we've done Zozo. I have my counselor with the Bethel Transformation. I also have a psychologist, therapist that the Cancer Institute offers. So I'm getting, I think, in my opinion, the best of both worlds. And the second thing is I have a fear of being unfruitful in the sense because I do share my husband and I both share our healing journey very publicly because we now felt like the language to share, and we've put a lot of things into practice. But my fear is I don't want to sound like I'm trying to attack, because I'm not trying to attack this man. I'm trying to bring awareness there's a spiritual abuse, and that we were very much abused, and now we're being victimized, or in a way, kind of made of an example, which is exactly the reason why when I first got the news of cancer, I waited until almost a week before my surgery to say anything, because the fear of man wanted to come back. And I did question, hey, did I get cancer because I got cursed by this ministry or whatever? So I'm sorry to unpack all this. It's just a lot, but you did answer a lot. I took down some notes about unmet needs. But my biggest thing here is, how can I practice compassion or extending compassion? And should I continue to share because I'm not sharing from a place of hurt. I don't think I'm sharing from a place of awareness. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. I think the compassion is naturally met when your need gets met. And so I think that, to me, I would say you may not have finished processing through, you may not have finished processing through just the pain that this has caused you and the need that you have, like from God, whatever that need is, it, God, are you going to restore me? Is my life going to be better? Am I going to walk with a limp forever? Right? Like, I think that's really what you need to get answered. Something like that, And I'll say this too, because I forgot to mention this. We can easily over process. So there is a rhythm to it. And to me, it's eat well, sleep well, exercise, have fun, and process once in a while. You can't process all week long. You can't. You can only process, I don't know, once or twice a week, max. And the rest, you need to eat well, sleep well, exercise, and have fun. Because sometimes we don't, sometimes we're having a hard time simply because we're not recharged. Life feels so tough and hard, and I'm slogging through it, and I feel like I'm drowning and I can't get my head above it. It's like, yeah, friggin' stop processing. Stop trying to process yourself into feeling energetic. That doesn't happen. That's where we have to get in a better life routine and start to get some, like, okay, and I'm getting some momentum, life's getting better. And so I think that you've got all this stuff going on. You're in the middle of cancer, the surgeries, and you're in the middle of, processing with 2 or 3 different counselors. Plus you're on KYLO, like you're in this. I would say, like, worry about the compassion piece when you're in a better spot. You're probably trying to do too much. You're probably trying to lift way too much. Like, and same thing with your story. Like, share your story when it feels fun to share your story and energetic and awesome and relieving. And I just have to because it's amazing. And like, you can't fight a battle on every front because you'll lose all of them. So to me, I'd be like, let's get through the surgeries and get feeling good about your life. And then let's think through, do I need to share the story, and who would it help, and how would it glorify God? And if you can answer that question, then do it in a way that's great and glorifies God and is awesome while you're emotionally recharged. So I just think that you're not emotionally recharged, honestly. And I think that you could throw more cooks in the kitchen, but if you only got 4 burners, you can only cook 4 burners, And so I think you've got 9 cooks in a 4 burner kitchen, and you just gotta get through and get back to a place where you're loving life and you've got some rhythm and some bandwidth. I think that we can easily over analyze our life and go like, man, I've got some unforgiveness towards this guy who's like, probably not. You're probably just really freaking tired. And if you'll know in a while when you're through the bulk of the surgeries and all that, you'll know, like, if there's a little bit left to be done, then fix it then.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, Kim.
I just wanted to thank you. That was amazing. I don't have a question, but I wanted to give a testimony, if that's okay.
Yeah, do it. As long as it's 2 minutes or less.
Got it. It won't be long, I promise. So I'm on here just because my marriage was kind of in stage one, where I was angry all the time. Like, I felt kind of like how I think Beth was saying, like, my husband's not abusive, but he just did not manage himself very well. And I always felt like I was just in it. I was hopeless. I was mad all the time. And just by doing these things, I didn't do exactly what you did, but I journaled a lot. And I learned really who God was instead of these lenses that I had of him. And because of that, like what I learned about myself was I was not expressing my needs. And what I learned that whenever my husband said or did something that triggered me, I learned to use that as a way to find out what I needed to be healed from. So whenever I got triggered by something he said, which for me, I never felt protected and I never felt adequate enough. Like I had a workspace mentality. So my husband would say something that I felt was critical, and I would go and journal and just write it down, and then figuring out like, oh, I think that God doesn't think I'm good enough. So I had to learn that lie, like learn to unbelieve that lie that God does think I'm good enough. And that's where I got, I think, the strength to go through it. And then, like you said, setting boundaries. And I just want to give people hope, because it's been 3 years since I started this journey, and my husband is turning around. Like boundaries helped. He's actually putting boundaries on me when I don't manage myself well. He doesn't follow KYLO. He knows none of this. And he is just completely changing. And he's not even honestly a believer. So I just want to give everyone hope that the compassion will come, the time will come. And now I see, and God told me too, like how Dee Dee said, she doesn't feel compassion yet. It took me forever to feel compassion for my husband. And the other day, God just told me, handle him with care. Like he's hurt too, but he just doesn't know how to handle it. So just, triggers are a great way to find where you need to heal from. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank you so much for all you do.
Absolutely. Great word. All right, Danny.
Hi. I have 3 questions. Number 1, how do you view pain now? Second, how does God view pain? And third, I have pain in the area of my stomach mainly, but I know it's emotional pain. But I don't know what it's from, but I feel it very I feel it physically. So if you have any thoughts on that, because I usually feel the pain and I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do with it? Like I'm asking God, I'm asking my mom or something, what should I do with it? Sometimes I hug myself, or I never did that in the past, but yeah.
Yeah. How do I view pain? It depends. I think mostly as necessary. It's a necessary part of life that I still hate and have learned to embrace for the most part. I would say that's probably the most honest answer. My mother-in-law just died 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and from cancer. And it's so painful. And it feels too early. I also know that everyone on this Zoom call today is going to die at some point. And you're going to leave behind somebody that's going to be in pain, which is so necessary, right? Like they're going to be in pain because you were awesome and they love you and you feel that place in their life and you were so necessary in their life. And, so it's unavoidable. I just think life is full of it. Life is full of we all have cars. Those cars are eventually, how many of you are going to have to replace your car tires at some point? Yep. How many of you are going to have to change your oil? How many of you are going to have to spend money on your car? We know it's inevitable. How many of you that's a little bit painful? It's painful. If you plan for it in a healthy way, it's less painful. If I save money for my tires, I'm not bummed out. If I save money for the oil, if I have bandwidth, right? If I don't run my life to the maximum, then I'm building a resilient life. And when pain comes, I've got some bandwidth to deal with it. I don't know. Every day there's pain. I went to the gym this morning and I found a whole bunch of pain this morning at the gym. And I put myself in pain. And it's like, well, that's for whatever reason that's necessary, because pleasure doesn't build a strong mind and a strong body. Pain does. So, but on the other hand, I've got some painful spots with my kids that, I have to really work hard to push into. And sometimes I've had painful spots with my wife that, like all of you, I have to get brave enough to talk about it. And it's scary and it's, oh, I don't want to do it. And I want to just put it off. But then I know, like, nah. So I create a culture and an ecosystem that supports good communication and healthy boundaries and not avoiding it. And I think the biggest thing for me is I don't do it on my own. I have a whole community that I'm doing life with now that took a long time to build, honestly, a long time to build. People are still bringing us meals. And my mother-in-law died, a couple, 3 weeks ago, and they're bringing us meals a month before that. And I have a community that's literally supporting me, that's helping me when I'm down, and they're doing it in a very practical way. But every meal says, I'm thinking about you, I care about you, I'm here for you. And, so there's also pleasure inside of it. As far as how God sees pain, I'm not a theologian, and I don't know. I don't really claim to be. I would say I felt a lot of pressure to be a long time ago, but I think God sees pain as both necessary and it depends on the context. So, it's why he says 300 and something times in the Bible. Some say 65, but to fear not, right? Like, well, because we experience fear and pain every day. There's a place to be afraid and to run away from. And I mean, I don't know. And the amount of news and media and doom and gloom, and there's a place to fear every single day. So I think that's why he gave us the comforter. It's why he's the Alpha and Omega. It's why he is all these different things to us. So the comfort in the storm. So I don't know exactly how to answer that question, except for it's why he is who he is. As far as what to do about the pain in your body, I would say if it's coming from, if it's trauma stored up in your body, it could definitely manifest as pain in your body. And that's where I would go get some help to work through, get professional help to work through the trauma in your life to help release the trauma from your body. So that's what I would do. Is trauma can definitely get stored up in your body and create pain. And so going and getting some help for that from a trauma therapist would be a great step. So
yes, but like, is there anything I like apart from what you already said about processing that I can do till I find one? Because at least in Germany, it takes some time to get one.
Yeah, you could also, there's a lot of places that will do telehealth, so they'll do appointments over Zoom. So you might actually find one in the US. Like betterhelp.com is a great place to go, where you might find help over Zoom at a trauma therapist. So I think Philippians 4 is a great verse for you to read. Philippians chapter 4 is a great place to start with learning how to change the way that we think. But as far as releasing trauma from your body, it's just not a place that I feel like I'm an expert. Where I feel like I'm a real expert to give you the steps to do that. I work with those kinds of people, but I think that you should, you should work with an expert to help you walk through that.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Lisa.
Hi. Did everybody hear when earlier he said that I was awesome? Okay, thank you. Okay, he said all of us was awesome, but it's fine. Okay, so here's the thing. It's been 22 years since my ex-husband cheated on me, right? Every year, I don't think about him at all whatsoever until that day. When that day comes around, every year, it's like crushing. And, I feel like I mean, clearly I've gotten over him. I have an amazing husband now. It's not anything like that. But could it be because it happened on September 11th, like the September 11th? Like I'm somehow just putting the two of them together?
It's really interesting. It's an interesting question, and again, like I'm not a trauma expert, so I don't know if it's like I'm linking this with this. It was just a really horrible day in my life. I'd be curious if you feel like you lost something that you haven't got back. I mean, that would be my question for you. So is, especially since it's crushing, I would say, like, what's the actual thought? What is crushing? It's not just like you wake up and you're like, I'm crushed. It's September 11th. It's like, is that the day that was it actually September 11th? Like the actual, yeah. So it's like,
and I didn't know what it was. So it was like, big deal.
Yeah, well, it's like this. When you have a little kid and they come home from school and they're like, everyone got to swing except for me. And you're like, it's not a big deal, no big deal. Well, that's their whole world.
Right.
That's that little kid's whole world, right? And so when we look at our past self and go like, what's the big deal? And I know you're not necessarily doing that to you. I'm teaching from this point.
I feel you.
Like, well, obviously, clearly was a big deal. I wonder how big of a deal it was to you. And I wonder if you got a pen and a piece of paper and started to write down, instead of just like, it's really crushing, I'm just going to move on with my day, I'm going to go out with my husband. If you actually just stopped and started to write down, like, what was that like for you? What happened to you on that day? Your whole world collapsed.
Yeah.
Your sense of security, your sense of safety, are you ever going to live again? Is the world ever going to be the same? Is the world that you know it ever going to exist? And it may just be that piece of you that's still stuck back there.
So good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, need some care. That would be what I would say.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, Marcus, what's up, man?
Hey Jay, thanks for coming in. So I don't really know the full way to ask this question, so stay with me for a second. Can you process this towards like a group of people or like a culture in general? Because since we started going through KYLO, I've realized I have a lot of unforgiveness or animosity towards like churchy Christian culture in general, like what you were talking about at the beginning of everything's fine, like, oh, we can't live in real life because we're Christians, so we're just going to keep saying like all of these good phrases that show how good of a Christian we are, but we live this tormented, terrible life because we have no life skills at all, and that being pressed and, exalted as, oh, look, these are the good Christians, versus like what you're talking about here is so important, of just actually being a human and experiencing this and going through that, but then realizing that this is really kind of discouraged by typical, like the most mainstream Christianity, I guess, of the way that I've experienced in so much. And we've had a lot of exposure to Bethel and things of that nature, and that's kind of our core. But I've always felt like I don't even fit in the church, or I don't even fit in this space or stuff like that. And so I don't know if this process works for that, or if you have any thought process or there. I would just love to hear your opinion on that a little bit more, since you.
Yeah, I think when we have a wound, when we're wounded by a place, the natural thing to do is to denounce and reject that whole place, right? Because it feels so disillusioning and so invalidating, and so I think that different cultures are good at different things. Literally, like I would say the Asian culture have mastered excellence. The downside of the Asian culture, speaking in generalizations, is the downside is perfectionism where they work themselves to death, right? When you say, oh, the English culture has really mastered diversity and what comes through diversity, right? So it's like, look at how when all of us work together, we create the most powerful nation in the world. Well, the downside is arrogance, right? Like Americans are confident like no other people, but they're also really arrogant and entitled. And I think when you look at mainstream church, it's like, man, so much of it sucks. But there's a whole lot of good inside of it too. Once you get to a place where you have a healthy culture inside of you, now I get to pull the best parts out of, what Bethel has to offer and what Hillsong has to offer and what the Catholic Church has to offer, honestly. I get to go into those places because I'm a whole, healthy, powerful, strong person. And I get to look at it through fresh eyes. And because I feel powerful instead of I feel lost, I feel scared, I don't have my people, I don't know where I belong. And so I think part of the healing process helps us to re-engage with that community in a different way. And I'll say that's even true inside of, you grow up with an abusive dad, you move out, you get healed. Dad's changed a little bit, but he hasn't changed a ton. You can engage with dad with better boundaries because you're in a better place, right? Whereas before it's like, I don't even ever want to see you. I don't even care if you're in my life. As you grow older, you're like, I feel more powerful than you. I feel protected. I don't need your validation and love like I used to, but you're still my dad. And so, I don't give you everything of me. I don't give you all that I wish I could, but you're still my dad. So I'm still going to get lunch with you every once in a while. We're still going to talk casually. We don't really go deep, but you're still my dad. And that's what I would say. I can't even remember your original question, but I think when we're talking about old wounds with old places, at first the tendency is to reject everything. But I think we get back into this healthy rhythm and routine where we're able to, get the best of all the different places and learn from one another. And yeah, so that's what I've noticed, at least.
That's awesome. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bobby, what's up?
Hello, I have two questions. One, I was going to kind of piggyback off of Summer. What about if you have a 16-year-old daughter? Would you still try to do the connection code, or you feel like when they're 16, she just has a lot of anger, she's actually mad and hurt towards me? What kind of advice would you give? And then I can tell when you were talking about unmet needs, I'm thinking that's what she has. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. What would you say are our needs? Like, I kind of started writing down the need to not feel rejected, the need to feel protected, the need to feel good enough. What would you say are some other main needs of what kind of brings us pain?
Yeah. Okay, give me the first question again.
Okay, so my 16-year-old daughter, so it was probably 4 years ago, she feels hurt from me. And when I'm hearing you talk about needs, I'm not meeting her needs somehow. Would you recommend with Summer, her daughter was 9, and you said do the connection codes? Do you feel at 16 when I don't have a relationship with her, if I asked her to do something, she'd just say no?
Yeah.
What would you do for a 16-year-old? She won't go to counseling. So I'm kind of pretending like I'm, not God, but I'm trying to learn. And then I just try to work with her, but there's not a good connection. So would you say 16-year-old is the same as a 9-year-old where you just try that connection code? Or what would you do?
And you said she won't go to counseling?
Oh, no. Like if I tell her, she'll do opposite of anything I tell her to do. There's just no relationship. There's just a lot of.
Do you know when did everything change?
I would say during COVID, there was just, a lot of emotions, that sort of thing. She did have a long concussion. So I think maybe that frontal lobe, the concussions just, I mean, it lasted 9 months. Yeah.
Are you married?
Yeah. Yeah. She loves my husband.
Okay.
But just, yeah, it's not a big fan of her mom.
Okay. Do you know what it is? Do you know why?
She just says that, like, she'll kind of use typical teenager talk, like I'm narcissistic. And I've been doing KYLO for quite a while. And so when I am providing boundaries, I try to be nice about them. I walk on eggshells, that sort of thing. She just says that I'm selfish. She just doesn't like me.
Got it. Okay. Great. Oof. Kids are tough. I'm so sorry you're going through that. There's so many different ways that you can kind of attack this. And I would say, like, well, if you probably, most ideas that you bring up to her on how she can change, how she can grow, how she can get better are probably going to get shot down by her, right? Because her core belief is that something's wrong with you, not that something's wrong with her. And that if you change, that her life would be so much better. So this, I think, is where you start to build the connection more than necessarily bringing the correction, which doesn't mean that you can't, have healthy boundaries and have some correction and stuff, but you really have to focus on the connection. Does she know that you care, and does she know how much you care? And so I would be working hard to create a strong connection with her. Strategically, what are the things that she likes to do that you can sow into, that you can pour into? And then especially, like, if you know that there's something that you do that isn't healthy, that's bringing her pain, or a moment, then I would clean up that mess. Or if there was something that happened, which it doesn't sound like there necessarily is, but if there is, making amends is an important part of living a healthy life. And so sometimes parents don't want to do that because we don't want to give kids permission to be mad at us. But you also don't give them permission to heal if you don't clean up a mess that you've made with them. So I would be really focused on picking your battles smart with her, and then there are certain seasons with my kids as they got older that my wife did heavy lifting in certain areas and I did heavy lifting in certain areas. So with my kids, like the boys, I would have to have conversations with them that my wife was not able to have with them in certain seasons of their life until they grew through that, until they got through it. And so it's like, man, maybe don't be the one that sets hard limits with her. Maybe have your husband do that for a little while, and you find some places to win with her, and not good cop, bad cop stuff, just genuine good places to win. I think you can absolutely implement some of the connection codes with them, especially if you and your husband implement it together with yourselves first. So again, the idea isn't, you're broken. There's some things that need to be fixed in you, young lady. You're just going to get tons of pushback. If your husband and you adopted the connection codes and it really worked for you, then it would be like your husband could introduce it, to your daughter, and you could just reinforce it in a healthy way. So I think when kids go through a really tough time, 14 was a super tough time for your daughter, and going through COVID and all that stuff. I think that she's probably looking for someone to blame. And I do think, like, yeah. So giving her a place to, what she really needs more than anything is a place to connect to. So we've had to do that with all of my kids. There's been different seasons when my kids growing up my kids went through a divorce. So They were just in tough, painful places, and they were angry. And they were angry at me. And I'm like, I didn't leave, but I get it. You're just angry. So I get it. And I can love you where you're at. So it's like I set boundaries when I had to, but I also worked really hard to build that connection, really hard. And sometimes my wife had a much stronger connection with him, with my, with the kids, my new wife. And so I would lean on her a lot, like to build that key. I would just build, as long as they're connected, to one of the parents, strong. That was great. So she had some hard conversations with him that I couldn't have, and vice versa. Sometimes I'd have hard conversations that she couldn't have. So, um, the other piece is your husband may be able to frame going to see a counselor differently than you. And timing is everything. So if he had a good father-daughter weekend with her and then was like, hey, I've been thinking, I really want you to grow in every area as much as possible. And I know that COVID was really challenging. I know that there was a lot of loss and a lot of pain in that season. I think that there's probably some things that you could process through that would really help you to grow, help you grow stronger. You don't even have to talk to us about what you process through. So you could, I would love to get you someone to help you to process through that stuff, just to make sure that you are functioning as healthy as possible. It's what healthy adults do. It's what mom does. It's what I do. You can go from that angle and see if that helps. When my son was your daughter's age, he looked at me and said, counseling's stupid. It doesn't work. I'm a counselor. So he was just super angry. And so it was like, okay, well, who was in his life that could talk to him? My dad actually had a great relationship with my son at that time. So my dad would often be the one to talk to my son about hard things. And so is there a person in your daughter's life that is older, more mature, that could help be that positive place in her life, like maybe a youth group counselor or somebody like that?
Yeah, that's what's interesting is she's definitely involved with the church. So yeah, I'll have to definitely start reaching out. She likes it to keep private too, so that's always difficult, but I appreciate your advice. I did write down a number of things, so thank you.
Yeah, we have to remember this isn't the final story. So, you all went through this with your parents, and she's going to go through it. When she comes back around, you just want her to not have this massive reason why she doesn't want to connect, because you've been reaching out and opening up the lines of connection, because she'll eventually come around to that, good spot where she wants connection with her parents. So, yeah. All right. Aileen. Oh, you're muted, girl.
Give me 5 seconds to walk into my room real quick. Hang on.
1, 2. No, you're good. No problem.
Hang on. Sorry. I just got home. Hold on.
You're great. Take your time.
Okay, perfect. I'm in my room now. So. Okay, so 8 years ago, I was divorced. My husband passed away, and it was hard. Then we were from Hawaii. It was a drowning accident. There was no body found, so grieving was hard. I was robbed of my grief because everybody said, "Well, you went through a divorce. You don't have right to grieve." So it took years and years of healing. And, when you said journal a lot, I've been journaling a lot since then. Last year during the holidays, because this happened around Thanksgiving, I sat through my pain, kind of like how you said, process it. And I allowed myself to sit with my pain. What that looked like was me in a journal and a Bible, laying in bed and allowing myself to feel the pain, journal about it, talk to God about it, and ask God, okay, where am I at? And I feel like we're in a jubilee year. This year makes 7 years since my husband passed. Our daughter actually became suicidal. I had to 50 her last year. So this year she wrote a poem about, she wrote a book about her grief and just her processing. And so she's actually become an author, and that's good things have come from that. But I guess my question is like, I feel like God said, you are going to get remarried one day. And the scripture that I stood on from 7 years ago was Romans 8:28. God will work all things out for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So I guess my unmet need, I guess my question is my unmet need a marriage that I feel like was robbed of me? Or I don't know, like I feel like I've helped my kids through the process, and I actually had to learn to stop carrying their grief. But I can see myself really angry, like even non-Christians, like I see them like, my gosh, you just moved to California 2 months ago, and how do you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and I don't? Like, so I guess my question is my unmet need a romantic relationship? So how do I know that?
Yeah, I don't know. You're gonna have to. I mean, to me, that's part of the processing. That's part of the journaling. Is I start to get in there and I find the theme. I find out like, oh wow, I'm still really struggling in this area, and I need God to answer that question for me. So when we don't process correctly, it just delays. It just delays it, right? So if you got a divorce and you didn't process through the divorce, and then your husband dies, and then people tell you, hey, why should you be sad? You divorced him. You shouldn't be sad. It's like, well, that just delays it. So, we think with our minds like it's been 7 years, but honestly, emotionally, it hasn't been 7 years because I didn't do 7 years worth of work. I did maybe a year, maybe half a year, maybe this last year when you sat down for the first time was the first time you've actually sat down and really processed through it. So, it's and that goes for all of us, right? It's like, man, if you did a lifetime of childhood pain and you never sat down and processed it, well, that wasn't a lifetime ago. You're still living it. That's what's running your life. That's what's making you, that's the trauma that you feel. So you're going to be the only one that knows ultimately what is the real need. And it's not going to be one. I had hundreds of them. Again, every painful memory that I process through, I have something that I need from God. There is something I need. So a lot of people journal, but journaling isn't necessarily processing. It can be, but sometimes journaling is just journaling. Sometimes you don't actually get deep enough journaling. And so, people write down stuff and then they get up and go. It's like, well, did you get anything from God? Did you actually find out what it was that you really needed and go all the way to the end with it? So that's what I think is going to be really helpful, is to make sure that you've gotten all the way to the end of the processing. So again, don't go drum up old stuff. But I think when you feel sad or when you feel lonely or when you feel pain, just take a second and go, oh, what's actually happening here? And that's where you can journal into that and find out what's really going on. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah. And I've been processing a lot of it through spiritual direction too. I've been getting a lot of spiritual direction for the last 4 years. So that's been really helpful. And I think for me, it's more, I know that bitterness comes from, I feel like I was robbed of my marriage. And I'm not even angry at my husband for, what he did. And, but I'm more like, and I know that's envy. That's probably just a sin of envy. Like, okay, that's the enemy thinking, wanting me to believe the lie that you're never going to get what you want. So, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Guys, thank you
Okay.
so much for this time. I appreciate all of you. Yeah, I love being on here.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.